Hello, welcome to Reader's Labyrinth. I am Frank, your host. Please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I would like to introduce Gage Greenwood. He is an incredible author of a genre-bending series of books, a prolific writer on Amazon Vella, which I had no idea existed until after my chat with him. I can't wait to follow him on Amazon. And furthermore, I purchased his book, Winter's Myth, and I am going to be leaving him a stellar review as soon as I finish it. If you've enjoyed this interview, I would hope that you would follow the link in the show notes and check out Gage's work and decide for yourself just how incredible his storytelling abilities are. I hope also that you will join me and Gage as we sit down and we talk about some of life's bigger questions, writing as an art and a technical skill. We also talk about his work paths, what led him to writing. We really like to get into what makes the world tick. I found this to be a very, very exciting conversation, and I hope you will sit down with me and think the same thing. Again, if you've enjoyed Reader's Labyrinth, I would ask that you like and subscribe. But more importantly than that, I would pass that up. If you were to go follow the show notes and click around and just look at the work that Gage has, I found it really, really cool. Thank you, and now let's get on with it. Gage Greenwood, welcome to Reader's Labyrinth, sir. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm doing a lot better now that I'm talking to you, now that I had a chance to read the first 5 pages of your book.
Right.
Only the first 5. I've been incredibly swamped, my man. I wanted to get the entire thing read by the time we sat down for this interview, but I'm going to use that as an excuse to set a date with you to come on for round 2. That's what I want to do. That is awesome. Well, without further ado, for our viewers, I would like to jump into question 1. Go ahead and drive the train on.
All right.
So when I visited your website at www.gagegreenwood.com, and there's a link in the show notes, my friends, I noticed that you've worn many hats. It listed actor, comedian, podcaster, and vice president of an escape room company. You'll be the 7th or so author I've spoken to, and it seems like everyone has a multifaceted work history, more than what is the norm. Do you think, for the question, there's something about writers that you guys need new experiences and hence move from one thing to another?
I think we're all just insane. It's probably.
Yes,
No.
I was hoping there was going to be something like that. Yes, I knew it.
I think there's probably 2 things at play there. One, to become a published author requires a lot of battling with your own brain, sort of overcoming your own self-doubt and all that kind of thing. So I think if you're talking to someone who's published, I think if you talk to most people, anybody, and you ask them to list a bunch of things they would like to do and like to try, or jobs they would have liked to have had, everyone would come up with a list. But I think with authors, you have people who were more willing to have gone after all of those things. And then I think also a lot of people get into publishing and becoming an author because they prefer to be their own boss. So you might have had people trying a lot of different jobs and not being able to stick around for it because they don't like being bossed around.
You know, what's really interesting about that, about the answer that you just gave is, for the folks who don't know, we were just talking about Frank Herbert, and he was a pearl diver. He was a geologist. He did some other job on a beach. I can't quite remember what it was. He was a land surveyor, and he even traveled with a circus, I believe, at one point in his life, and even had the pay stubs to prove it. And it seems like most of your really, really good authors are able to take that varied work experience, and they often take like a little pearl of wisdom from every single job. And I've seen that kind of working its way into the stories. And that's why, like, all of my favorite authors, and again, the first 5 pages of your book is but they have a grittiness. The authors that have this background, their stories have a realism to them, and they don't taste like they're a contrived story. And that's what I really love about it. And I've always wanted to like take a survey of all my favorite contemporary authors and see which of them have this work, this history about them, where they'll go from job to job and they excel at the job, but there's just something stirring in them. Like you said, I mean, they're a different kind of personality. They have a little bit of craziness in them. And I don't know if you've ever read any Jeff Kripal, but he was talking about how writers and artists, they have kind of like a little bit of the trickster or the joker mentality to them. And he was going into like these archetypes and stuff in his books. But I really see that with you guys. And that's something that I've always admired about writers. And speaking of Frank Herbert, Frank Herbert once said that the true mark of a writer isn't the number of books he sold. Rather, it was how he chose to answer the following question. And this is a question I have for you, Gage. If you had a crystal ball and looking into the future saw that you'd never sell another copy of a book again, would you still sit down and write? And for the record, I think Frank Herbert said that he would take up drawing, but
I can answer that honestly because I did write for 30 years since I was a kid, pretty consistently without ever or very rarely trying to publish until last year when I finally did publish. So I can say that, yes, I would continue to write just for the enjoyment of it, but with the caveat that I probably wouldn't put as much regiment into it. Like, for example, I've written stuff where, I got like 50% in and then said, all right, well, I know how this is going to end now. And I just stopped, because I didn't plan on ever having it read by anyone else. So as long as I knew where it was going, then I could stop.
So you would sit down and you would put the work into a manuscript, but as soon as you saw where the story's going, you decided to step away from it.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
I know where it's going to end now.
Oh, no. I think that's fascinating. So my question for you is, so it doesn't sound like you outline your stories in. I guess it's page one. Is it chapter one, or how does it go for you?
It's a little bit of both. I'm definitely more on the pantser side than on the plotter side for sure. But I usually have some idea where it's going, and it's just a matter of figuring out how it's going to get there. But I definitely let the characters drive the story for sure. And sometimes they surprise me and I end up with a lot longer of a story than I thought I was going to have. Yeah. But yeah, definitely more towards the pantsing side. But with a destination in mind.
So whenever you're thinking about a story, is this something that you think about whenever you sit down in front of your word processor, or before you sit down to write, was a story kind of percolating in the back of your head? And like, were you thinking about it for a long time and then you sat down to write? I'm really curious where your ideas come from and how they materialize.
It varies. Winter's Myths, for example, percolated for a long time. And there was different elements that came into play at different times that made me kind of put them all together. But some stories I've just like, I need to get some writing done. I haven't written in a day or two, so let's sit down and write something, and I have no idea what I'm going to write, and then I just pour out words.
I love it. It's definitely going to be some very authentic writing then, and that's something that, as a reader that doesn't really understand the technical aspect of writing, we can really appreciate, because authentic writing that comes from the heart, it isn't someone trying to gauge the market. It isn't someone, trying to artificially create these characters, but when they come from that Jungian part of your brain that's just kind of, speaking to you out, from, as a character in a novel, we can really sense that. Kind of like someone that goes to an orchestra. They may not know, hey, the baritone is playing in harmony, your trombone is doing third harmony, but they know whenever it's flowing together. And so we all certainly appreciate that. When did you first realize that you wanted to be a writer?
There's a few different times. When I was the first time was when I was really young, probably like 8 or 9. My mom was a poet in the 80s, and she was a published poet. So it was watching her and seeing her. I mean, this is like the 80s. She had the little click-clack typewriter. She also used to write letters to the editor, like constantly for the newspaper. So she was always on her typewriter. And I just would sit and like want to mimic her. At the time, I was a reader. Like I was reading like Hardy Boys books and stuff like that. But I didn't really. I wanted to write, but I didn't really have anything in particular that I wanted to write. So I just kind of wrote nothing really. And then I stole my sister's copy of the Edgar Allan Poe collection. And that's when I decided that was where I was going to be focusing on my writing.
So the entire point of this interview was to discover what your gateway drug into writing was. And I think I figured out what it was. It was Edgar Allan Poe. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you think that your mother is coming out in your writing at all? Like, is her influence on you? Like, whenever you're writing, do you think about your mother?
Yeah, sometimes for sure. It's hard not to have that kind of over my head a little bit. And I mean, we always talked about writing. We always talked about books. When I was a kid, like if I was bored and I was whining about being bored, she would say, "Go write a story. Then you could be wherever you want to be." So she was always into that, like getting into your creative headspace. That's just how she taught. That's how she raised us to be. So anytime I'm creative, even if I'm not writing, just trying to get into a creative mindset at all, it's definitely my mother's influence. That's
as a reader that's kind of looking on the outside towards the writing as an art and a craft, I was always fascinated by how there's always like this initiatory process. Like there's someone close to a writer who influenced a writer that may have taught, the writer about their imagination as your mother did, and about the beauty of that liminal space in your own head that you can just kind of crawl into. And there's something almost occult or esoteric about writing. It's solitary, yet you're never writing alone. There's always a community. That's your genre. There's a community of readers. The readers will read your words, and through some kind of cognitive process in our brain, like we're running this artificial reality machine, and we're envisioning the world. We're envisioning Winter's myth and the characters and the driving force in there. And it's really an art that I see absolutely exploding in this age of new media, and with the decline of the traditional, the evil empire of the publishing houses, as I like to call them, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But moving on. So most of your writing, or some of your writing, is serial fiction. And I was wondering, what's the difference between serial fiction and novel fiction? And for any new or aspiring authors out there, should they choose one over the other?
Should you choose one over the other is really going to depend on your writing style. So the quick definition would be a book is to a movie the way serial fiction is to a TV show. So with a book, even if you're writing a series, then you're talking Rocky 1, 2, and 3. You have each book is the movie, and then you get the series. But with the serial fiction, you're looking at like the long game. You're looking at writing shorter chapters with big cliffhangers, and then moving on to the next one, and keeping that going for. I mean, it really depends on the author. Some authors will write one that's just a book length story but the reader comes back to it every week to see where the story's at. And some people are writing the long game. There's one author on Kindle Vella writing serials. She's on her like 5th volume now, and each volume is over 500 chapters. So she's
oh my god,
really
wow, yeah.
So it depends on like for me, I have some that are just going to be when they're done, they'll be the size of a book, and then Winter's Myths is going to be multiple seasons, probably 3 or 4. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, so basically it's like a TV show. You get that cliffhanger at the end. You can't wait till the next episode comes out, that kind of thing.
Well, that's really cool, because whenever I was trying to look up the definition online, I kind of had the initial impression that it was a novel where they would just kind of give you scene by scene or chapter by chapter. But what it sounds like, based on what you're telling me, is that the fundamental structure of the story itself is different. Like you said, with the cliffhangers in it and the devices that's present in the writing. So it sounds like, it's its own animal, just completely apart from like a serialization of a novel then. I guess is how we could.
I would definitely say it is. And it hasn't always been that way historically. Charles Dickens was a big serial fiction writer, and almost every book by him was first published serialized. But then when it was put together, it was basically a book that he put out chapter by chapter. But in today's market, serial fiction is very competitive, and a reader has a million other options. So you really want to get them with those cliffhangers, and you want them to want to come back to the next episode. There's also one thing that serial fiction really hones in on is everybody who loves to read would love to read a book, but we live in a world now where people are working 2-3 jobs. They come home to their kids. There's not a lot of time, and serial fiction offers them they can just read on their phone while they're on the bus, or when they're brushing their teeth in the morning. You can kind of read that.
Absolutely love it. Oh yeah, I love that answer, because if you look at the model of publishing today with like the traditional publishing houses, it's almost like they're stuck in like the late 70s, the 80s, and early 90s, where most of the people were buying these paperbacks, where the paperbacks just flooded into the market, and people were reading them while they were waiting for a bus stop, while they were waiting to get on a plane or something like that. And what you just said is filling me with a lot of hope for authors out there, because, hey, here's a niche that you can get into. Here's a market that you can get into. And it's something that, because one of the challenges is getting writing to kind of blend into the technology that we have around us. But what I'm really liking about the idea is that it seems like you're giving them stories that are easily digestible. It doesn't take a lot of time commitment up front, and it's something that they can keep in the back of their mind. And a cliffhanger, I mean, that's like, seeing a bear in the woods or something. You're going to remember it. It's going to have this emotional imprint on you. So that can kind of help you keep track of everything. While we're on it, what is Kindle Vella, and is that separate from Kindle Books? Where can we go to find it? And I know I said I was going to give an introduction, but I would just like to hear kind of where the viewers out there can go get it.
Yeah, so serial fiction is kind of in a boom right now. It's everywhere. There's like 1,000 serial fiction apps right now. Serial fiction never went away in Eastern cultures, but here in the West, it sort of died down to the point where even Stephen King struggled with it a little bit when he released The Green Mile in serial format. But that was the 90s. So it's in a boom right now. So Amazon saw that and said, we got to get in on this. So you asked if it's separate from Kindle, and it is sort of. If you're on the Kindle app, there is a button you can hit to go to Kindle Vella. And then there you'll have serials, and the way that they model it is you can read any serial, the first 3 episodes of any serial completely for free, and then if you enjoy it, you have to unlock episodes to keep going, and those cost tokens, which you buy in bundles of hundreds. So it's like $1.99, you get 200 tokens, and an episode can be anywhere from like 6 tokens to 15. So you can read for quite a while. And get a lot of episodes when you buy just like $1.99 bundle. Amazon always offers new readers free tokens to start anyway, so you probably get like a good 15 episodes for free before you get anywhere. And actually, right now, as of today, I don't know when this episode will air, they're actually doing like 100 free episodes a day for readers. So,
oh my gosh, that's man,
and it's great.
That's awesome.
Paying the authors big bonuses just for interactions on your story. So if you go on today and you have 100 free episodes to read and you read all 100 of them, you paid $0 for it, but Amazon's going to pay me as if you bought a token bundle for every one of those episodes. So Amazon's
really incredible.
They're really trying to reward the authors because it's a new platform. They need the authors to build the audience. So they're rewarding us pretty heavily for it right now.
So what I'm going to do whenever we're finished with this interview is I'm going to make a YouTube short with instructions on how to do this, on where they can click, on where they can go, because what you said is really kind of is sticking out to me. Whenever you were talking about what Amazon was doing, in the back of my head, I kept hearing free and tokens, and I thought, well, are they going to, are they going to compensate my favorite authors? Are they going to compensate the people I'm making this connection with? But I mean, if you're telling me that, they're going to give you a bonus for these interactions, then I'm 100% down for it. I think that's awesome. I think that's incredible, actually. That
I'll tell you
Amazon's
right
doing
now,
that.
when I started publishing last October on Kindle Vella, I started with a $0 budget. I said, I'm going to go into this. I'm going to publish my stuff. I'll make my own covers for now, blah, blah, blah. And then whatever I make from it, I can put back in. And Kindle Vella on its own, just the bonuses that Amazon has given me, has afforded me a professional editor, professional cover designs, the ISBNs for the book, pro writing aid, like everything that I've needed. It's all been because of the Kindle Vella bonuses. And I'm a first time author. So it's like,
that is wonderful. Wow.
Yeah. So they're really taking care of us.
Well, so, have you written any full length novels? I think I saw one on there, right? Or at least one or two. That's right. Winter's Myth is. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Right, cool.
And then, I wrote a story called Bunker Dogs on there. That's complete now. That's
Bunker
gonna go.
Dogs looks great. I was reading the synopsis of it. I'm like, hell yes. I love urban horror stories, like the horror that's down your street. Because hey, we all of us know to avoid the house that is on the hill and lightning is striking it at 3 a.m. every single night. We all know not to go there.
Yeah.
But the house that, where there's just this lurking evil that's just kind of, oh man, I love that. I love that kind of stuff. It looks really good. I can't wait to dig into it. Yeah. Which for the viewers who are watching this, Gage Greenwood has a YouTube channel and he will go over Kindle Vella with you. He'll tell you how to do it on a zero budget. I was watching it myself. I was getting a little bit envious because I think his YouTube channel is awesome. I think it's pretty cool. So you guys definitely need to check it out. And there will be a link in the show notes as well. So moving on with our questions, bringing some more light to this. So this is going to be a question for writers out there. So one piece of advice I've heard given to new writers is this, that they should consume as many stories in their respective genre as possible in order to learn that particular market of writers. In my experience, I've seen this advice provide no benefit whatsoever in some cases, and at other times really help an author reach their readers. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with you 100% that I've seen it be extremely valuable and not valuable at all. I think this is a little bit like, I have depression and anxiety and I see a therapist for that, but I couldn't then give that advice to someone else with depression and anxiety because it's different for everyone and you would need your own therapist to understand you and your needs. And I think that's kind of true with writing as well. If you want to be a horror writer and you have only read one horror book, you probably need to do a lot more reading in that genre to understand the expectations of your reader. But I would say it's equally as valuable to read stuff outside of your genre and understand what makes that genre so popular. To give an example, if you asked 100 fantasy readers what they love most about fantasy, you'd probably see no shortage of people saying world building. And world building may not be as valuable or as used in horror, but I don't think any horror fans would complain if there was some really great world building in it. And we've seen that. I mean, Clive Barker does some amazing world building. Stephen King even does some great world building. So I think there's value in reading outside of your genre as much as inside your genre. If you're writing to market, if you're just trying to capture those niches and those tropes and lock them all down, then read like nothing but your genre. Personally, I can't do that. You only need to look at how I dress to know that I am not good at following the trends. I'm way behind on the trends. And I don't want to really. I just want to write the stuff. I mean, Winter's Myths I have no idea how to market that book. It's not fantasy enough for fantasy readers. It's not horror enough for horror readers, but it's got both. So far, both fantasy and horror readers seem to love it. Getting them to check it out is a whole nother ballgame, a little trickier to do. It's a story with, it's a dystopian genre bender. There's Kevin Bacon in it. There's, I don't even know how to explain it to people. So I'm not very good at sticking to market.
which I absolutely love about the authors of today, Gage, because which for the record, I did buy your book. I'm just going to say it is on my Kindle. It's at like 2%, but I did buy it. I am going to read it. And what I love about the genre bending aspect is that so much of writing, I think, was influenced by the markets of the 70s and 80s. And what influenced those markets, it wasn't so much the imagination, of course, and it wasn't the editors, but it was just how they physically bound these damn books up. I mean, a horror book had to be a certain space on a shelf, a certain dimension. It had to weigh a certain amount whenever they shipped it. And that's where like a lot of these word counts came from. That's where like a lot of, the constrictions on the stories lasted. But then when the internet came out, when broadband came out, and you had people who were able to take their imagination and spin tales into it, those strictures were no longer there, but like horses walking around with blinders on, it's like everyone just tried to stay in these little troughs where there was no fence, really. And what I like about Winter's Myth is that finally some people are starting to make a spearhead, and they're starting to get out of that. I primarily market my show on Twitter, to try and get authors. And I always say all genres. But what I really want to say is all authors. Just bring me your imagination. Because a good story is going to have everything in it. It's going to have a little bit of romance. It's going to have some horror, some fantasy, world building, everything. Because I believe as a reader that good fiction tells the truth of reality better than a nonfiction book does. Has a way of taking a magnifying glass and, or a better analogy would be a prism. It puts a prism on one aspect of humanity and what we go through, and it blows it up in the imagination. And that's what I really like about it. And I'm so excited about all the authors that are coming out with really, really cool stuff like Winter Myth. And let's see here. So when you were writing Winter's Myth, and we talked about, you may do a little bit of both. Sometimes you'll use an outline. Sometimes it's page 1 and chapter 1. Where did the idea for Winter's Myth come from, and what's the writing process like for that?
So the first time I thought about anything that came into play for Winter's Myths was when before the pandemic, I was when I would drive to work, I had like a 40-minute drive. And I would listen to audiobooks, and I was listening to Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. It was just him telling the Norse myths. And I've always appreciated mythology, and so much of it from Greek, Roman, they were trying to explain their world, right? Their world as they knew it, and trying to give some answers as to how some of it came to be. Even if they were just trying to have fun with it, or, not necessarily take it seriously. So I thought, what would a modern mythology be? What would it be if somebody came into our world for the first time and saw a car and a DVD player and a movie theater and those kinds of things, not knowing what it was? What would the mythologies be that they would create? And that was it. It was just that question that I wanted to answer in a story form. But I couldn't come up with who would be these characters that would not know. And then years later, I was talking to my brother, and he's really big into like the survivalist communities. And I thought, oh, that's it. A little bit like the movie Blast from the Past. You have this guy and his children raised underground. So their whole lives, they've just been underground, like, no idea what's going on up there. Maybe given some hints by like the people of the community who did live on Earth before, but they're not going to know what a car is. They're not going to know what a DVD player is. And so they come up to Earth, they find it largely abandoned, and it's a survival story of him and his daughters just trying to stay alive in this post-apocalyptic world, with him telling his daughters these fairy tales to keep them at ease and to help them make sense of what they're seeing, because they've never even seen the sun before. So he has to explain that, and he thinks
that is philosophical right there. That is Plato's cave. I love that. Yeah, haven't even seen the sun. Yeah, that is absolutely cool. Yeah, and I am really looking forward to jumping into it. And again, there will be a link to Winter's Myth as well in the show notes. So So those who are curious, those who dare to step into those waters, please click his link and check his book out. So
if you like Kevin Bacon, you'll like the book.
There you go. Kevin Bacon, guys, come on. So speaking of bunker dogs, I had to work this one in here. One thing that really sets your work apart is the really cool cover art. Bunker Dogs has that creepy, surreal face coming at me from God knows what nightmare. It's something that's really stuck with me. Where does the idea for your artwork come from? Is this, do you have a designer, you tell them, I want this, and they come up with it, or do you have a central image?
Yeah, so I definitely got to give the credit to someone else on this one. When I first started publishing, I wanted to have the same kind of mentality that I have with tattoos, which was always to get a new artist every time. Someone who, just a different person each time. Everything would look very different from one another. But then I met Luke Spooner, who has designed all of my art. He did my logo. He's done everything now because he's a master at like capturing dread and dark, scary things with also like a sense of whimsy almost, and like a very cartoonish sort of look, which is something that I like to meld together all the time. Winter's Myths is like, it goes from one chapter that's really silly about Abraham Lincoln as an ice giant, and the next chapter is dark and brutal and horrific. And I just think Luke Spooner captures that so well. But more than that, he really takes the time to understand me and my style. And he does that with every author he works with and every person he works with. He really wants to know who you are and what you're writing, and he captures that so well. So I'll just go to him with Bunker Dogs. I went to him. I gave him a quick synopsis of the story, and I said, I really want like the face of these people on there, with the jawless face. They have no jaw. And then a day later, he gave me that cover. A day later.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's incredible.
With Winter's Myths, this is a really good example of how he listens to his people that he works with, because I just gave him a synopsis of the book, and I did that with another artist first. And this other artist was like an amazing artist. He was very, very talented, and he drew me this picture of Winter and his two daughters running out of a hole. Right? It was a great picture. I used it for a long time, but when I wanted to come with novel form, I asked Luke to do the cover for me. I gave him the synopsis, and he gave it back to me, and he said, I know your last cover had them running out of the hole, but the story is all about them running into the world. It's them they should be looking at the world and seeing this big looming thing in front of them, because that's where the story is. It's not about what's behind them. And he came up with that cover design with them kind of like the silhouettes of them looking up at this big glowing world around them with ominous figures everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, ominous is a great word to describe it. And it is so refreshing to encounter another human being who is an expert at their craft, and they understand human psychology. It sounds like this designer understands literary fiction really, really well. And, it's almost like he came up with a vision of your story that is similar to what you had, but hey, this is what it could be. And what I like about fiction is that emotional truth that it can convey in a book cover. And I've seen some good stuff. I've seen some not so good stuff with book covers. But as a reader, I can say that that's a big selling point for us. And another thing, as a reader, there's always there's always a vanity, I guess. And it's like, hey, whenever I look at my Kindle, I want to see a lot of cool, these covers in it. And I mean, especially the ones that will convey the atmosphere and emotional energy of whatever story that we're about to read. And yours definitely passed muster on that. So whenever you sit down to read a book, and I don't know the last time you've read a book, but what do you look for in a great story?
Definitely the most important aspect for me is the characters. There have been a ton of books I've put down because I just couldn't get into the characters. I don't need to relate to them. In fact, it's good when I don't relate to them, because then I'm learning new experiences and getting into the mindset of someone who's unlike me is perfect. But I have to want to follow that character into the dark, into wherever they're headed. And there have been great books with good characters that I just didn't get into the characters and I had to put them down. So character is definitely my biggest thing that I need there. And then I like big questions. The story can be written simplistically, or it can be written with a ton of style and beautiful prose. But it needs to ask big questions. Not necessarily philosophical, but I like philosophical questions, or just, I mean, that's why I love the horror genre so much, because it's always tackling the things we don't want to talk about or think about. It's life and death. It's, you know, Pet Sematary. Me and you were talking about Pet Sematary earlier. I mean, the whole horror in that book isn't the people coming back from the dead. The horror is that, sometime someone you love is going to die, and that's a sucky thing to have to deal with. And that's truly what the horror is in that. And that's why I love the horror genre, because it's always looking at those dark corners that we don't want to ask the questions about, but we need to think about them.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the horror genre, you know, if you look at the three main branches of philosophy, ontology, epistemology, and ethics, So I've read some great horror books. I've read some not so great horror books, but all of them tackle those three central questions that philosophy asks. You know, ontology, what is reality? Epistemology, how do we know what we know? Ethics, what is right, what is wrong? And like you said about Pet Sematary, you know, I don't know if King was doing this intentionally or not, but he covers all of those bases. And as someone who minored in philosophy in college, which, you know, it amounted to like 8 classes or something at the 200 level, it's nothing big, but I can really, really appreciate that. And I'm always looking for that angle to in books, because even if you're someone who doesn't read a lot of books, even if you're someone who, quote unquote, doesn't think philosophically, you're still running a script in your head over those 3 central questions. What is reality? How do we know what we know? And what is good and what is bad? And a really great author brings that script out, either makes it front and center, or it's really nuanced. It's running in the background, and it's helping to drive the characters, helping to build the landscape of their thoughts. I find that really, really cool. So moving on from that, I have a question about the traditional publishing houses. Now, I don't know if you're currently trying to court them or not. I don't know if you want to answer this question, and that's perfectly fine. I don't know if you're trying to get an agent or whatever you want to do. And
I'm not currently.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, then we're about to send in the dive bombers on this one. We're going to send our HIMARS out. But so I have interviewed several incredible authors of horror and fantasy and nonfiction, enough to make me believe that the traditional publishing houses are doomed. They are doomed to an apocalyptic wasteland unless they can harness the raw talent that I'm seeing out there in the new media. And specifically, I believe you just outlined for us Kindle Vella, which sounds like a Darwinian fight for the best writer. And the indie publishing world, so they're edging in and they're taking all the talent. What are your thoughts on this? And more importantly, why haven't the big box publishers been able to adapt to our new, to our current marketplaces?
All right, there's a lot there.
Sorry about that. I can repeat it, or you can just answer one. You can skip it. I don't mean.
No. I think it was a great question.
I'm a master of rabbit holes. Much apologies.
I have to admit, I don't know enough about what traditional publishers are doing to have any kind of advice for them, or you know what I mean, or to say they're doomed. I don't know that I would say they're doomed. I read books from traditional published authors and from indie authors, but I know what I like and I know where to find it. So, I'm reading a book right now called Ghost Eaters. It was traditionally published, but it's not taking up the most shelf space at Barnes and Nobles. And I think the big book places are operating a lot of the ways that the movie industry does, where they are taking some chances, and there are some really, really great books that are being traditionally published, but they're not the ones that are going to be in your face. They're not going to be the ones you see. It's going to be the $1 million makers. Like in movies, it's the remakes and the Marvel movies and those kind of things. But that doesn't mean there aren't some darlings out there, some good gems. So I think that they need to do a better job of spotlighting those books, because I've heard some horror stories from new authors who got traditionally published and got nothing for it, and ended up never making their initial payment back, and struggled, and then ended up self-publishing and did much better. Unless you're Stephen King, even if you're traditionally published, you got to market yourself. You're going to have to do all those things on your own. The big publishers aren't going to do that for you anymore.
Because they're giving it to Stephen King.
Right. Yeah. They're
Did you know
creating
that,
a cycle there, right? Like that's.
Did you know that his 2 stories or his 2 novels that he released, he didn't earn back the advance on it, and he still makes a royalty off of the books that are sold on it?
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah, and then like your friend who tried to stand at traditional the publishing houses, they they basically got rid of their mid-list authors, the authors who they had on the books for like 10 years or so. The authors who would sell probably 10,000 copies of a book a year, or a collection, and they said, "Hey, we're going to do away with all these authors, and we're going to put everything into our top 2%. We're going to turn into a super seller model."
Yeah.
And but anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, I think that's.
I was triggered.
Yeah. I mean, they may not be doomed because of that. They may just get the super sellers, and that's all they'll be. But if they want to continue to have a big wedge in the marketplace, they need the mid-list back. They need to invest more into smaller authors. Whereas in the independent market, not self-published, but independent as in like small publisher markets, what you're seeing is a lot of these small publishers taking big chances on stuff that they think is really different, and helping that author hone in on finding their market, and then getting that story that blows up and making them. Like D&T Publishing is taking a lot of chances.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And doing a lot of cool things. They have Megan Stockton, who we both know, her book coming out next year called Blue Jay, and that is a big chance book. But there is no way that book doesn't become an indie darling. That book is beautiful and horrific and amazing.
I am really, really excited about it, my friend. I am super excited about it. So she is writing about one of my favorite monsters, and I'm not going to give it away if we're thinking of the same story here, but I think she's going to have a cover reveal in November, is what it is. I think that,
she's
gonna do that, yeah.
Ones, but I do know the one you're talking about as well.
Oh yeah. Okay. I didn't know about this one, but I am definitely going to be keeping tabs on that. So yeah. So that sounds really, really cool. You see, I learned something. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well,
and then you have
cool.
like D&T did Left to You last year, which it's a story about a demon and the Holocaust, and like it blew people away. It blew people away. And I mean, he was Daniel Weld was an established author, but that one really like skyrocketed into the stratosphere, and he was nominated for a Bram Stoker for it. And that book would have never been traditionally published. Never. They would have been terrified of that book.
How do you get nominated for a Bram Stoker award? Sorry.
So you have to join the Horror Writers Association, and then as a member of to get into the Horror Writers Association, you have to meet certain criteria for basically your successes, how much money you've made on your books, and then when you get in, you offer your story up for nomination, and then everyone who's a member can read it and then decide if they, decide who they think should be nominated that year in a big pool. It's a very big pool. So to get nominated is quite the honor.
Is it open to indie, to the indie authors as well, or is it traditional only?
Nope, you can be a self-published author or an indie author. But again, you have to meet certain criteria. I think you have to have, if it's for short stories, you have to have pro sales. So I think it's like 10 cents or more, or 8 cents or more per word on your short stories. if you're a self-published author, I think you have to have made $2,000 on your book in a year. So it's not like an extreme hurdle. It's, I think most self-published authors don't make that. If the internet is correct, I think they said the average indie author makes like $500 their first year. So it might take a couple of years for you to get there, but $2,000 I don't think is an extreme hurdle.
Yeah, and I have to agree with it. It sounds like a really fair process too. Especially if they open up their doors to the indie authors on that. Yeah,
they do, and they not only do, but they show them respect. It's not like
that's
we'll
awesome.
let you in, but you got to go sit at the kids' table.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So when I was looking at your website, I believe in there that it talked about some dark music that you like to mellow out to, and for me, myself personally, when I'm looking for that existential dread, I like to listen to dark synth kind of music, like Mararu, Fantagram, and Dark Castle. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to read the questions, and my eyes are starting to blur a little bit. But there's something about the driving beat and nuanced melody that always subordinates to harmony, that just brings out the slowing of time in the universe, and that slow feeling kicks in with the groups I just mentioned. And I was just wondering, whenever you mention dark music, what are you listening to, and what do you get out of that?
I'm going to become totally uncool here.
It's all cool. Is it Cher? It's okay. Is it Britney Spears? I am perfectly okay with that.
It's not Britney Spears, but I do sometimes listen to Folklore by Taylor Swift.
There it is. There it is. Interview. Oh, no, I'm joking.
Yeah. It's a great album, man. Folklore is a great album. But
well, she's a great artist. I mean, she is wonderful. I mean, she's really, really good. I mean, I'm not gonna. Yeah.
So I mean, just anything that it's really tough because I wouldn't say there's any like specific type of music that can drive me down. It's really just about the music itself. Like what is the name of that song? Damn it, I can't think of it now. We're gonna come back to that.
Okay.
But I'll listen to like a lot of like early 2000s emo too. Like
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
so that kind of stuff. A lot of Americana. Trampled by Turtles. I don't know if you know them.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of
Gaslight Anthem. That kind of stuff can bring me down. Like Gaslight Anthem wrote an album that it was like their least popular album, or maybe their least critically acclaimed. But it was like right after the singer went through a divorce, so like all the songs are really, really, really depressing. So I'll listen to that a lot. Man, I cannot think of the song now, but there's an '80s song, and it's like when you hear it as it is, it sounds like upbeat. But it's Take On Me. Take On Me.
Take On Me. Okay.
Acoustic version of that song, man. It's just like
that is an internet meme now. That's like yeah. That's awesome. I love that. So have you ever heard of the Toadies in the song Possum Kingdom? I don't know.
Oh yeah,
that is a wonderful song. Yeah. I really love that. I get a kick out of it. So Gage, I understand that you also have a YouTube channel called Gage Greenwood Writes, a fiction writer's journey. And for any of you aspiring authors out there, I think you need to get on that and absorb his knowledge, especially Kindle Vella. And I believe you have a couple of videos out on how to get started up with zero budget on there. Am I correct in this?
Yep.
Cool. So how long has your YouTube channel been around?
So my YouTube channel started at the end of August.
Yeah. What? Oh, no, nothing. Go on, please. Sorry.
So I started in August of last year, the end of August, and it actually was a totally different thing when I first started it. It was me giving myself at the age of 42 1 year to accomplish my three, or not my biggest three dream goals, but three dream goals that I had, and I was giving myself a year to accomplish them. One was to run a 5K in under 30 minutes. The other one was to design and sell a board game. And then the last one was to write and publish a novel. Because it was, like I told you, I've been writing for 30 years and I always said I might publish someday, but I never really tried. And, the pandemic was going on and I was spending a lot of time with my son, who was 4 at the time. And I said, he's either going to have a dad who talked about all the things he wanted to do, or he's going to have a dad who did them and wasn't afraid to fail. So I did the YouTube channel as a way to kind of like put the camera on myself and force myself to really try at this stuff. And the first couple months, it was like really focused on me trying to get in shape for the 5K, which I did run my first 5K in 38
Awesome.
minutes.
Oh,
38 minutes was my time. I didn't make my
that's
time.
Good.
And then like shortly after that is when I heard about Kindle Vella and I started publishing on there. The one thing that I really love about Kindle Vella, and one of the reasons that I really wanted to do it, is because if I'm putting out something episode by episode and I have even like 2 or 3 followers, then I have to give them the content, right? Like I can't just let them down and not come back next week. So it's going to force me to finish and to write everything for them. And it turned out that I had a lot more than a few followers. Part of that was the benefit of going onto a new platform. So there wasn't as much competition. I think when I started, there was only 10,000 stories on there, and I was in the top 100, which was like the visibility for that was just incredible. And all of a sudden, people were reading my story and people were really liking me and people were leaving reviews. So I had to keep up with that. And then since then, I've nonstop wrote, which means that I did not run again in another 5K, and I never designed a board game, but I did publish my first novel. So that's really why the Kindle Vella stuff became such a focus on my channel for a long time, because it became what I was doing all the time. And what I wanted to do with my channel was, it was a new platform. There was a lot of new authors on it. There was a lot of people like me who've wanted to publish for a long time and needed that thing to get them to do it. And Kindle Vella was that for a lot of people. It was just that motivating factor. So I was a new author. I couldn't go on there and give you these big lectures on how you should do publishing because I didn't know myself. So I went to experts and I got answers from them. I had the #1 seller on Kindle Vella, who has now had over 1 million reads on her story. I had her on, and I had the #2, and I had the #3, and I had the marketing manager for one of the biggest publishers on there. I mean, one of the biggest authors on there. And I asked the questions that I wanted the answers to, because I knew that it was the questions that everybody had. And it sort of I became the channel for Kindle Vella, which was very unexpected, to the point where I haven't published a video in a couple months now because I've been working on other stuff, and I'm actually rebranding my channel. But I still, every day that I look at it, I have at least a few new followers because people are trying Kindle Vella, and there's not a lot of information out there. So they're finding my videos to get that information.
I love it. Like, you were doing multiple things at one time, especially with your channel. You were fulfilling a need in the market, and you were getting some information to write a book yourself, or, to swim in these new oceans. I think that's really, really cool. And by the way, hats off to the authors who took their time to come onto your show and talk to you and share the knowledge. That is so cool. This is what I love. I love stories where people who are more successful than you, they're not going to build a fence around themselves. They're going to let you walk, just walk onto their property, and, and they'll make you a hot dog or something. I mean, I love that. So kudos to them. I mean, that's really, really awesome.
And the #1 author on there, she's a romance author. Her name is Audrey Carlin.
Romance is huge. It is freaking huge.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's especially huge in serial fiction.
Oh man. Okay.
But this Audrey Carlin she's already a successful author. She's had numerous books out before she joined Kindle Vella. And it just had a movie come out last year on a streaming service. So she's big time, and she, like, I just messaged her and said, like, hey, you want to be on my show? And she's like, absolutely. And I was like,
cool.
At the time, my channel had like less than 100 subscribers, I think. And she was like, yeah, sure. I don't, fine. And then like, I was like, oh, okay, you sure? And then she was like, yeah, let's do it. And then she was so motivating and like helpful and just like really like gung ho. She was awesome. And still to this day, she'll message me and just check up on me and see how things are going and stuff. So
that's awesome, Gage. Yeah, that is awesome. And ever since I decided to dip my toes into this, this project that I'm doing with Reader's Labyrinth about 2 months ago, the relationships that I've built up. I mean, you guys are so awesome. I mean, the community, the intellectual, that stimulation. I've always said that whenever I go to work, I have to be Clark Kent. Clark Kent has a boss. Clark Kent has a job that he doesn't like. But whenever I come home, I'm able to have this transformation into who I want to be. And a big part of that, is these conversations, the conversations with you, the other guests I've had on here. And that is totally, totally cool. I see that we're coming up on the hour here. I think another 7 minutes or so. But I was just wondering, what are your goals for 2023, both professionally and personally?
Okay, so, professionally, I hope to have 4 books published next year. 2 of them will be Bunker Dogs and On a Clear Day. So the writing is already there. Redoing Bunker Dogs, it needs to be changed from what it was as serial format into book format. I'm going to change that story a lot. On a Clear Day, you can see Block Island is, I need to finish it in serial format. And then I think from serial format to book format, that one will transfer pretty well. But get the editing done on all those and the book cover design. So that'll be the beginning of next year. I'll be able to get those out. And then I have 2 more novels that I want to write for next year.
2 of them in a year. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I write a lot.
Good.
Yeah. The writing part isn't so, I can do that fast. But then I take a lot of time to do the editing, my own editing, before it goes to the professional editor to really make the story what it needs to be. Because especially when you're writing in serial format and you're doing that cliffhanger thing, there's a lot of buildup, and sometimes you have to paint yourself out of a corner and go in like a really wild direction. Where when I'm writing it, when I change it for book format, I try and take away those slants a little bit more and make it more of a straight line. It's much like if you read comic books is like the ultimate serial fiction, right? That's what they do, and they'll have these kind of like 6-issue arcs, and then like a bigger thing that goes for like 100 issues, but what happens in 6 issues completely changes from the next 6 issues. And that's kind of what I do with the serial format. But if you're putting that into a book, that doesn't really flow as well. So I guess it would be like taking 2 years worth of comic books and turning it into a Marvel movie. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
You need to change it a bit.
Definitely.
So professionally, 4 books next year is the goal. And then personally, I need to get more organized. I have, like you said, I'm trying to wear a lot of hats at once. So sometimes I'll start carrying the dishes, and I got a lot of stuff that I'm balanced, like that cartoon character balancing.
Oh,
that
I
big
know.
thing.
Yeah.
I'm really good at dropping those plates, and then
I hear you on that for sure.
Takes a long time.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome. That is awesome, Gage. I really, really appreciate you coming on here, sir. I've really enjoyed it. Oh yeah, sure. And like I said, this entire thing was a plot to get you to come on for round 2 in a couple of months, my man.
Yeah.
One thing that I look for whenever I look to have a guest is I like to find someone who not only would I buy their book and read it, but is there, are the waters, are they deep enough to have them back on again? And can we go out and explore another part of the pond? So I would love to have you back on. There's all these other topics I'd love to talk to you about.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Cool. Well, thank you for being on here, Gage. And I hope to talk to you later, buddy.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.